They say dreams can come true, and so it did for a young boy sitting in the stands watching his father and grandfathers compete at Addington Raceway. At age 7, a young Anthony Butt would scribble his name at the top of the then Drivers' Premiership. Names like Holmes, Smolenski, May and Carmichael falling below his. 40 years later, and his dream would be realised. While he may not have won a premiership, he has won more than 1,600 races and accrued more than $20 million in stakes. There's no doubt that Anthony Butt has earned the title of champion driver.
Anthony, often racing is decided by breeding, and in your case, well, I don't know that there could have been any better genes in terms of who your two grandfathers were.
No, very lucky, Greg. You know, two legends of the sport. You know, both started at the very bottom and didn't really have any family in the game, and both, you know, obviously loved the horses and, you know, started as stable hands, and I think they both might have worked for nothing for a while just to get a bit of experience. And but yeah, and actually my great-grandfather was a trainer as well. He trained and drove Dave Bennett from the famous Bennett family on the West Coast. So yeah, we go back a long way.
Yeah, you had the pedigree right from the start.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Grandad Wes, because he was renowned for being a very hard worker.
Yeah, great guy, Wes. He was a real gentleman, you know, he very clean living sort of guy, worked really hard, very organised, you know, trained a big team, you know, for a lot of years, and yeah, he's an amazing man, you know. He used to, you know, he often used to tell a story when he trained the big team of horses. He'd get up early in the morning, feed up, he'd get out with the jog, do the first jog, and then as he's coming off the track, he'd have it timed that would be when the staff arrived. So they'd take the jog off him and he'd go and have breakfast. So, you know, there's not too many trainers would do that. But yeah, and then he, you know, he's a lot of success with the trotters, you know, had some good paces too, but yeah, very good with the, you know, shoeing. Loved, you know, the theory about shoeing trotters, and yeah, and as I said, he started from nothing, and I think he won the premiership 7 times. And
Grandad Derek was an outstanding horseman. Again, a very hard worker, but a good socialiser, to be fair to say, and a friend to everyone. And I'm not understating that at all, because he genuinely was.
Yeah, he, you know, same thing, he's a legend. He was different to Wes. He was, you know, he's probably more social and loved to drink, and you know, he's everybody's friend. He's sort of the gentleman of the game, and his same thing, started from nothing, working in stables, worked his way up, and you know, both of them had success very early on in their careers, and you know, so you know, made life very easy for us, you know, later on.
Did the family heritage bring a level of pressure for you and for the kids to an extent?
Not at all, no. There was never any pressure. It was always sort of more of a fun thing in our day. We didn't race as much as they do today, and it was, I mean, they were dedicated, they wanted to do it, and I don't know, they just gelled really.
And horses were always part of the family, so at what stage did Anthony show an interest? What's your earliest memory of him around the horses?
He showed the most interest as a very young child. He was 3, and he would have reins on chairs, chaff sacks, anything he put his reins on, he had reins. We had a little tin rocking horse. It got belted every single day, and all our friends in the racing game used to give him colours, because they knew he was, you know. So I can tell you funny stories about that. He'd put on the colours and he'd take off the actual driver. So one particular story was funny. Mrs. Hampton, Gavin Hampton, lived next door. Now, Gavin Hampton was a very good driver and a very successful driver. So Mrs. Hampton used to come and have a hair done on a Saturday, and Anthony used to put the colours on during the week. And Gavin had a peculiar way of driving, shaking like this. So when Mary came to have a hair done, I used to have to hide the colours because they'd put the colours on and take Gavin off so much. I thought, well, we can't have that. Jack Grant was another one he used to take off and he'd blow. So he was mad keen from a very young age. Let's
go back to early days, school days, and what you remember of that time. Was it a case of going to race meetings? You know, they're often at the weekend, mainly on Saturdays back in those days. And when you first recall you having a passion for the horse, can you tell us about that? Yeah, well, we're just involved with horse all our lives, Greg. You know, Dad used to work for Wes, you know, when we were really little, and I remember going down there at Mankind Lodge there at Templeton and walking the horses after they worked. And yeah, we didn't know anything different. We're always at the race meetings, and you know, as we were really young kids, we used to obviously not take a lot of interest in the racing, but
we'd be at the back fighting with the O'Reilly boys and things like that. But yeah, we're always at the races, and so yeah, Templeton, went to Templeton Primary, and it was a big trotting area, and a lot of the guys were, you know, probably a bit older than me, like Jimmy Curtin and Craig Newfield and those sort of guys, Mark Smolinski. They were, you know, obviously older, but I remember them being at primary school with us, so it was just a place where, you know, horses were always talked about and around.
So what sort of child was he?
He was a normal, everyday child. Loved rugby. Our home was a hub for all the local children because there's plenty of places to kick around the ball. He was brought up in close association with his cousins, David and Penny, and we had a lot of fun in those days. Like, the kids would we'd be inside on a Sunday, and the kids would be up the stable gearing up a horse. I don't know, we were quite slack parents really, but David and him used to gear up the horses in a way they'd have a bit of fun. But no, he was just, sport was the big thing in those days really, but he did love this racing.
What about some of the success your dad had? Because whilst he didn't reach the heights of Derek or Wes, he was a pretty handy horseman.
Yeah, Dad was, you know, he loved it. He had some good horses. He drove Diamond Moose. I think he won the Kaikoura Cup with him. Drove him in the New Zealand Cup in that famous smash. He was involved in that, so it wasn't so good for him. But yeah, you know, he had some good horses. Game Nean and Stridham was a good trotter early days. So yeah, he was, you know, not a hobby trainer. He was always full time, but always had sort of 10 or 15 in work, and you know, loved going on the circuits. Always went to Nelson and Blenheim and those kind of things.
What about school life for you? Often in these types of shows we talk about going there to eat your lunch and play sport. Was it a bit more than that for you?
Yeah, I actually wasn't too bad at school. People, I was very good at maths actually. I actually was in my high school, the top of the whole school at maths. So, but yeah, you know, as I said, loved sport. We were very into the sport. But yeah, I didn't like school, but you know, I wasn't nil at it sort of thing, and I had to stay till I got my school certificate at Lincoln High School, so we weren't allowed to leave till then. So it's actually a funny story that been going to Derek's for quite a few years before that, you know, on the weekends, and his foreman left about a month before school cert, and so the job was there for me, opened up. So I left school on the Friday before Cup Week and started working for Derek full time, and then used to take an afternoon off about a month later and go back and sat the school cert and got it. So
that wasn't a bad effort.
Yeah.
They all had to get the school cert. Roddy had 4 years, but he was the only one because he stayed there because of
would
rugby.
Ants have dropped out if he could have? Would he have gone?
Yes.
Yeah.
I used to take his white shirt in every morning. He'd say, I should be in my working clothes. I used to cough it every morning.
Yeah.
But he went to Dad's a lot at the weekends,
Yeah.
even, you know, really, really young, and cut his teeth. I remember the first time he had a drive at home, he harped and harped and harped, and I suppose he was about 5 or 6, and Murray said he could drive an old trotter. He said, well, he can't come to any harm. So he goes out the track with his whole trotter, and in those days you got a puncher and it went bang.
Yeah.
So this trotter goes bang, and Ant's got his hands out like this, and Murray said, don't worry, the horse will get tired before he is. Well, he comes out, about 10 rounds it went before he stopped. And he comes these wee arms into, and I'm a bit worried, but Murray said, he'll be fine, the horse will get tired.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was always destined to do it.
On the sports field, he was pretty handy, particularly at rugby, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah, he went to South Island under 16 level and had to make a decision, but rugby was all his life, and all his friends in those days were rugby. Yeah, he played a lot. He played for King Country and South, you know, once he got the South Island, that was quite huge
Some
for
pretty
us.
handy players back in
Yeah,
those
he
days
did.
too.
He played with Stephen Bishop and Andrew McCormick, and yeah, you know, they were just kids then, but they went on to do wonderful things.
Early days, back when you started working for DG, you were a pretty prolific rugby player and actually enjoyed quite a bit of success, more than what a lot of people may well remember or may not even know. I think you made a South Island team, and yeah, but it curtailed, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I love rugby. Like, we all played when we were kids, and yeah, we played to a pretty high level. I was captain of the Canterbury Country team, I think. 1 year in the South Island tournament, we made the final. Well, 2 years I was in it, we made the final both years, played Canterbury, so that was great. And then the second year I made the South Island team, but I was first five, and there's a guy playing for Canterbury called Stephen Bishop. So
Oh, he went okay.
he was hard. He was hard to get past. So when we played the North Island, we played a curtain raiser to the Aussie, the All Blacks Aussie test at Eden Park, and we played the curtain raiser. And Stephen Bishop was first five, and I was sort of reserve. I covered first five fullback. So yeah, they were, you know, really good times.
Any sort of regrets that you weren't able to carry on with that? I mean, I know the other side of your life's been so successful, but yeah, do you feel a little bit, I suppose, aggrieved that you couldn't carry on to at least a senior rugby level?
Not really. Like, I always loved driving, you know, and
Yep.
I was always going to do that. And back in them days, all the money was in racing and none in rugby, so I was probably born too soon. But no, and when I played rugby, the last couple of years, I was playing for so many teams that it was just so hectic. Like, at the time I was playing for the first 15, your club, playing for Ellesmere, which was the local rep team, then Canterbury Country, then, you know, the South Island team, and I was playing or training every day.
Yeah.
And like, you'd play a hard match on a Saturday afternoon, and then would have rep training on a Sunday morning at 8 o'clock at, you know, an hour away, sort of. And yeah, it was really probably a little bit of burnout, and I don't think things were very well managed back in those days, because there was no sort of, you know, each coach didn't know what the other coach was doing, you know, or the other team, so they all trained you hard, but they didn't realise that you'd played a hard game the day before.
Yeah,
So no, not really. You know, I love rugby, but I love racing more.
Anthony, a famous road, wasn't it? Trent's Road. You had Globe Lodge, where the great horses, Johnny Globe and the like, were their lordship. And then, of course, Derek's property and his son's Peter beside it. So you were really in harness racing royalty land, weren't you?
Yeah, well, the whole area, Greg, like, you know, Wes was on the corner there, you know, early days when I was a kid. He had sort of nearly retired by the time I got started. But yeah, Cecil Devine was next to him. Jack Carmichael, you know, across the road virtually, and then Jack Smolinski was there in his heyday. And yeah, it was and funny that I ended up driving for, you know, all of them basically, you know, later in life.
Your father's influence on Anthony and his ability to drive, particularly in the big races, you could never understate that, could you?
It was huge. He groomed Premiership to be his first drive. And he'd put our kids in the cart where we would never have done. He'd put them in the big float to drive down and get petrol in the car. We'd been about 16. He'd say, take the float down to the petrol station. Dad was an encourager. They also had a wonderful father who encouraged them. He never judged them and he never controlled them. So they were allowed to develop to what they were. You know, at 16, Tim could get a float and drive it to Nelson races, and they always developed their own personalities. So I think that showed through all their life. They're not frightened to take a punt. It's me that has the sleepless nights when they pay $200,000 for a horse. It's not them. When I think, who were you going to get the owners from? But, oh, don't worry, I'll get someone.
Yeah.
So they had, and Dad, he was that easygoing encouragement.
Yeah.
Yeah, massive.
Your longevity with DG, I mean, not often a family member can work for another family member for the period you did. I think it was something like 14 or 15 years, because there's generally going to be some sort of fallout, but that wasn't with DG, was it?
No, I don't think we ever had a row.
Yeah.
No, he was great. I started going there when I was probably 8 or 9, and I went there because he was the big trainer. He was probably the leading South Island trainer at the time, had all racehorses, and when you went to Derek's on a Saturday morning, whoever was there got to drive. Doesn't matter who it was, and if we run out of work carts, we'd use the race carts, you know. And so I was driving fast work, you know, time I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and 4 and 5 horse workouts, and to me it was like being at the races. It was the closest thing I could get to race driving, so that's why I sort of went towards him, because I probably loved the glamour of the good horses and the race days, and on a Saturday, you know, Derek and Pete and I would go to the races, and the staff would stay home and do the rest of the work, but you know, I guess I was handy in a way, you know, being able to strap the horses on race day.
So you leave school, we're talking early 80s, and your driving career kicks off in 83, and a pretty auspicious start as well.
Yeah, I was pretty lucky. Well, not lucky, I probably, Derek looked after me. We had a really good 3-year-old, the year before I had my trials licence, and I remember going to the trials, and Pete said, oh, you can drive the Lordship horse today. And he just sat parked and bolted in his qualifying trial, and he looked at the Derby horse, and Derek said, oh, I'll turn this horse out, I think he needs a bit of time. Now, you know, Premiership obviously, and so he turned him out and got him back in, and I think he timed his first start for my first start, so it's pretty lucky.
And also, it was at Hutt Park where a bloke with a decent sort of commentary voice was making his debut as well, I understand.
Yeah, the first night I drove was Tony Lee's first night calling, so a bit of history there. So yeah, Tony and I have been friends ever since, so I met him on that trip, and yeah, it's, you know, quite a coincidence.
Tell me a little bit about the historical days and the times of going up there, because it was a fair haul to get there for a start, and they were always 2-night meetings and some great camaraderie.
Yeah, it was, and it actually made me as a driver. Like Derek I think he made a point of always sending a team, once I started driving, to send a team. They used to race probably twice every month, and he'd always send 4 or 5 up, and I'd take them up and look after them, and you'd always pick up some other drives, outside drives, and you started driving for people you probably wouldn't normally drive for, say if I was around Christchurch. So, and it was a really good grounding. The North Island guys would come down, and South Island guys would go up and would meet, and yeah, it was great days. I remember, one of the first trips I went on, Peter Wolfenden was, he was the king, and he was, not long before he got hurt and retired, but I was driving one of Derek's. I think I was the favourite, and I was in front, and Wolfie come hooping around with a lap to go, and the 100 miles out and took the front off me, and I was in the trail, and then turning over home, he was gone. But he pulled out and let me up the inside, and I was only a kid. I was, probably meant nothing to him, but I always remembered. I thought, well, if you're going no good, get out of someone's way, and it was a great gesture at the time, and I've never forgot it.
And you'll also would have learned a lot about your legendary status in the steward's room as well, because you had to be pretty smart and pretty swift with your replies to then some pretty strong characters were stewards, weren't they?
Yeah, yep. Peter McKenzie was sort of the...
I was thinking of him.
When the first day, and I remember, I think on my first holiday up there, and probably deserved it, but I think he gave me a bit longer than I should have got, but so I never sort of... We weren't best mates after that anyway.
Yeah, often described as Perry Mason in the room you've been over the years, but you've generally, suspension-wise, it hasn't been a huge part of your driving career, has it? You haven't had too many.
No, and I've always, had a lot of respect from other drivers. When I was a kid, the old guys were around like Jack Smolinski, Felix Newfield, Jack Carmichael, Derek, and we respected them so much, and so I always, never tried to be smart. I remember, they knock you down. You'd nearly apologise to them for getting in their way. So, but no, they were great guys to learn off because they were very hard drivers. They were fair, but tough men, and from the old school. And so it was actually really good education driving against people like that.
Go back to Premiership. Gave you your first drive in the New Zealand Cup. Didn't all go well leading into it. I know you'd won some of the lead-ups, but unfortunately about 4 or 5 days out from the Cup, things went a little bit awry, didn't they? Yeah,
he was flying in the spring. I think he won 3 of the 4 lead-ups, and we were really confident leading into the Cup, and he took him to the Cup trials just to top him off, as they used to do in those days, and he fibulated and had to only win a lap and had to pull him up, and I was only probably 18 at the time, and pretty devastated, thinking you're going to scratch in the Cup, and I remember that night we went home, and Derek, we had a handstand in the race as well, and he was coming at the end of it, obviously, but Derek was driving him, and he said, if Premiership scratches, you can drive hands down, so that give me a little boost, but no, we patched him up and got him right, but he was just a couple of runs short, he missed the Cup trial, and we couldn't work him in between, so he went a really good race, he led up, and probably still in front, 100 out, and just got swamped late.
Yeah, by Uncle Peter and Borana, the greatest upset in the Cup in the last 50 years anyway.
Yeah, it was great family win it anyway, but great through in those days to have a drive in the Cup.
It's Premiership, 200 metres to go. Preux Chevalier's under the stick, he's trying to wear Premiership down. Camelot's trying to dive bomb them, and here's Borana. Borana down the outside has got up. Preux Chevalier's been headed off, and Borana's going away, and Almada's coming with him, and Royden Glen is flying home. But Borana's won the 1985 Toyota New Zealand Cup.
It wasn't long after that you started an association with a trotter called Simon Katz, and more about who trained that and the subsequent family relations from there. But he was a good horse to get on, wasn't he? And I think, did he win all 3 days and nights of the Cup Carnival the year he won the Dominion? Yep,
he did. It was a long story, or not a long story, but Dick had been driving him he'd been in the open class ranks for a couple of years, and Dick just sort of felt he needed a change with driving wise, and Kerry O'Reilly was Dick's blacksmith and his second driver at the time, and he offered it to Kerry, and Kerry had just taken the drive in Tobago about the week before for the season. Back in a lot of people used to engage him for the season those days, and so yeah, I got lucky. They offered it to me, and got on him, and he was a bit of a cunning old bugger. He's an old gelding. I think he's 9 years old by this stage, and Dick said, whatever you do, you can't hit him, and he'll hit him, he'll pull up. And the first night I drove him, I was straight up to win, and he was going to win. He just halfway up the straight, he'd had enough, and he half pulled up and got third. So the next week I drove him, and same thing, loomed up to win. He went to do the same, and I just give him 3 or 4 with a whip as hard as I could, and it changed his whole attitude. Yeah. And he bounced, and he went on one that night, and never had any trouble with him ever again. I could hit him if I needed to, and yeah, he had a great season. I think that year I drove him 15 times, and he was never out of the first 3, and he won all 3 nights of the Cup meeting. My first Group 1 with the Dominion. Then he went to took me to Aussie for the Inters, run 3rd in the final. And then he ran 2nd in the Rowe Cup to Highwood, I think.
So he gave you plenty of great thrills, but then Dick and Leonie gave you your first wife, and Karen, and someone described to me the other day she was the best looking bird in Ashburton or something at the time. So yeah, there was a dynasty began in that regard as well.
Yeah, well, that's how Karen and I were going out at the time. That's probably how I got on Simon Cat. So yeah. So we got married not long after, I think, the end of Dominions in Melbourne. So yep.
She's every inch a lady, but when it comes to taking on the boys, she's got the spirit of the 90s. She pulls no punches, and she certainly doesn't act her age. In human
Funny how
terms,
things turn out, as was the case with your next good horse. Possibly the best pacer you've ever driven, and that's a pretty big stretch when we start talking about some of the ones you've driven since then. But what were your first recollections of Blossom Lady, who of course was developed by Stephen Doody, and he did such a magnificent job with her? She came to Derek's well into her career. It wasn't early on.
No, she actually came down as a late 3-year-old just for a couple of starts, and I actually jumped off her. We sort of had an unwritten rule at Derek's that I had first pick all the drives, but if there was something else in the race I'd been driving, got good drive, I'd drive that and let Derek drive our ones, because he used to still like driving here and there. And I was so she came down. We didn't know anything about her, and she's in the last race at Ringua, and I was been driving one for Graham Hale, and so naturally I said, well, I might as well keep driving her, and you drive Stephen Doody's horse. So he drove her, and she won. Paid a big dividend, I think. And then she went back, and she came back a couple of years later, and she'd sort of run out of her classes in the Manawatu, and I'd sent her to Frank Cooney in Auckland, but Frank couldn't get her going the Auckland way around.
She never liked it, did she?
No,
It was never her go. Yeah.
No, so, and I remember she come back to us, and Derek was at the end of Dominions, and he used to go to the end of Dominions every year for 2 or 3 weeks, and I was in charge, and she come down. She just looked magnificent. Frank had done a great job with her, and I was working her, and I thought, shit, this thing's working good. And so we lined up in the Harada Cup first up, and I had it won all the way up the straight, and she ran out a bit near the finish as she used to do, and John Hay got up and beat me. And but yeah, that was the start of
a remarkable next 5 years, really, to be fair, because her durability, and we talked before off camera about breaking down and how badly she broke down, and how courageous she was.
Yeah, well, she just got better and better. We didn't think much of her to start with, and but Derek sort of worked out how to work her. It's a well-known story, but she just used to take an enormous amount of work. And once we sort of worked that out, and
he said on several occasions he had to be cruel. How hard you worked. You worked her race speed and then some.
Yep. And I should have wrote it down. I know in my mind what we used to work her, but it was just phenomenal what we had to work her. And the off days would swim her and free leg her, and she was no good without it. She was hopeless, and but we got her into a really good system, and worked out what suited her. And as you said, I think she raced in 6 New Zealand Cups, and it sort of went forever. Yeah.
Now Derek had won a cup, obviously, with hands down, and had the thrill of doing that. But what do you remember of the build up to the '92 Cup with her?
Yeah, well, it was a 3rd try actually. The first year, she was. Come into it as a favourite, I think. She'd been going good, and I probably underdrove her. I was probably too young and too scared to make a mistake, and I should have gone a lap out, and I didn't. I sat in, and she flashed home, and I think Neroship won her that year, and she only got beaten probably a length or half a length, but yeah, I just, I think looking back, if it had been a later stage, she would have won that. I should have gone.
Out wide at Kylie's Hero. Here comes Blossom Lady. Getting a run on the rolls is Bowl Sharvard. But it's Neroship, and they're running him down now, but he's getting there. And it's Neroship, and here comes Blossom Lady, but it's Starship. Oh, Neroship got it.
When she did win, she was, the film was a bit in and out leading in, but just got the perfect run on the day. Got away really good, which wasn't easy with her. She's a bit tricky to get away. And then I think I was on the fence early and got out and got the 1-1 the last lap. And I remember Jack Smolinski was following me with G. Veneto, and he was half carting all the way down the back trying to get me going. And I wouldn't go, and I wouldn't go. And So yeah, I didn't have to pull out of the 400 and she was too strong.
It's Blossom Lady in front of Giovanetto. Listen to the crowd. It's Blossom Lady. Blossom Lady's going to win the cup, but she's done it the only mare of the race. Blossom Lady from Giovanetto.
I reckon you'd even remember this, the roar of the Canterbury crowd about probably 100 metres off the post. I was there in the public standing there, and I can remember it was just unbelievable. It must have been unreal out on the track.
Yeah, well, you don't sort of notice it when you're driving, but she was obviously a crowd favourite, and it was a bit of a dream because you're a Canterbury boy, and you know, it's great to have a drive in the cup, and then to win it is, you know, I just couldn't believe it really, and it didn't really. The next month I was just on such a high, you know, so it was a pretty special day.
Celebration at the Changwa on picking was on the cards. It was quite often on the cards around that time.
Yeah, I've got a photo here actually somewhere that Derek and I with the cup, and yeah, Changwa, you know, Toy Chan, great mate of Derek's. We often went there, and I remember, you know, we're drinking out of the cup and smoking cigars, and Derek used to hate smoking, but I think he was having the puff on the cigar that night.
That race, when she won in 92, the Cup, is that your greatest memory? Because she won a couple of big races in Australia. Twice she won the Hunter Cup, once off a back mark. What race stands out? Is it because...
Well, probably the Cup, but the first Hunter Cup, Anthony actually took her himself to Australia.
Right.
He was so young, and he trained her for 6 or 7 weeks, so he would have talked Dad into taking her to Australia. And he swam at Warwick Farm with her in the pool and trained her, and she won. And then she went back and won the next year as well. So the Inter-Dominions were always good with her, but she was never quite right for any of the Inters.
Yeah,
but as I say, the Cup's always special.
Soundness-wise, it was a challenge for her.
And the Cup's always special, isn't it?
Anthony, whilst the New Zealand Cup was arguably her greatest moment in the sport, twice she won the Hunter Cup, the second of those off 30 metres. That was an unreal performance, not only for winning the race, but the field she was in.
Yeah, and it's probably one of the great races, Greg. You know, I remember Gordon Rothicker, who was a legend in Aussie at the time, he said it was the greatest race he'd ever seen. You know, back in those days, we used to start off 30, I think she was off, back with Golden Rain and Master Musician and Desperate Comment. And the field was a little bit, you know, there was a bit of a gap between the best one and the worst one back in those days. And the boys up front, they began and thought the only way they were going to beat us was to run along, but yeah, they just sort of held a skelter the first couple of laps, and we all got, the 4 back markers all got into it, sort of a lap out or a lap and a half out, we made our move.
I reckon Chris Alford on Golden Rain is getting itchy fingers. He might pull to the outside towards the 1600 metre corner. Yeah, there he goes on the champion now, Golden Rain. Liberty JJ pulls out in front of him though. Then Butler's Love followed by Desperate Comment now pulling out, and the runs are coming towards the lap and a half mark.
Chris found the front with Golden Rain. I was outside him, and Master Musician came, and I left him 3 wide, and Pete was sitting on our backs with Desperate Comment. You know, 4 millionaires. We basically cleared out from the field a lap out, and we just went. We were all flat the whole last lap. It was just a survival of the fittest. But she, you know,
she was the fittest.
Yeah, she brained him. Yeah,
and she loved that sort of hard grind, as hard as you want to go on there.
Yeah.
Third quarter winner, 28.7. It's the mare Blossom Lady, and leader in front. Master Musician on the outsiders after her. Then Golden Rain, Desperate Comment. But it's the mare still in front, Blossom Lady. From on the outside, Master Musician. Oh, she's a grand old mare, Blossom Lady. And she takes out the AG Hunter Cup. Mighty effort. Blossom Lady wins 2 metres to Master Musician.
It was a wonderful era because you throw in horses' names like Chokin, and you arrived at the Addington series of 95, and gee, that was a deep series. And of course, Desperate Comment, well, he went 3-8 in that last race, one of the heats of the Inters. I think Bloss might have been in there.
Yeah, she was, I think, yeah.
Like, to break 3:10 back then was ridiculous. Obviously, they go a lot quicker now, but that was one heck of a heat of the Inter-Dominion, let alone the final.
Yeah, it was a great era, you know, probably from when Bloss started racing the Cups to the finish. You know, she's seen some great horses, you know, Christopher Vance, Chokin, you know, Master Musician, Golden Rain, Westburn Grant, she raced him, and, you know, the list goes on and on. Yeah, so, you know, she beat them all at different times, yeah.
Your father's influence and obviously having Wes Butt on the other side, how have both Tim and Anthony introduced the ability of both of these horse people and utilise that to their greatest skill level that they've got to now?
I think they picked best out of both of them. Dad was an easygoing, fun-loving whiskey drinker. Wes was a hard-working, good-living, totally different backgrounds, and that it was a great combination for our children. It was great.
Anthony, the end of Blossom Lady was around the time that your time with Derek sort of ended as well.
Yeah, it was probably, Blossom probably prolonged it a little bit. Like Tim and I had bought the property at
Curra's Road
there, Clary Road's his old place, and I think we'd bought that sort of late 80s. So it was always going to happen, but probably Blossom Lady just kept me at Derek's for a few more years. Derek was obviously quieting down, and I wanted to get bigger and he wanted to get smaller, sort of thing. But we never fell out or anything, but it just come to the stage where actually come to the time. Nigel was working for Derek at the time too, and he had a small stable at the time. Probably didn't have enough for both of us to drive, and Nigel said, well, I might leave and go somewhere else. And I said, well, how about you stay and I leave? And so it worked out good. So yeah, but no, it was, as I said, Tim was getting bigger and bigger, and it was just a natural progression.
Yeah, you hit the ground running with that new stable too, or when I say new stable, it was pretty run down when you blokes took it over.
Yeah, well, people don't realise that Tim started from nothing. He went out on his own when he was about 18 at Robin's. Robin had a second barn there, and he went out there just breaking in and pre-training for Robin and Pete mainly, and Pete Jones, and so yeah, he started right at the bottom, and as he slowly built up, and then when we bought the old stables, he went there, and yeah, just started off with some, bad horses, and we started buying them down south, cheap ones, and had a lot of luck with them, and as I said, that gave the owners the confidence to spend a bit more money, would buy a cheap one and they'd win a few races and won some money, and they were happy to reinvest, so that's really how it took off.
Your Star Happy Asset looms up on the outside, and Greeny's fella through on the inside. Happy Asset's in front of the cup though, and the Sky City Auckland Cup goes to Happy Asset. Second, Your Star, third, Greeny's fella.
Towards the end of the 90s, Happy Asset was the horse that you needed. He got himself an Auckland Cup, obviously, and raced on the Grand Circuit, and was Tim's first really sojourn into it.
Yeah, he was, and he come from down south. Again, the owners had bought some cheaper horses, done well out of them, and reinvested. And I think he was 20 or 25,000, something like that. And he was probably our first bigger purchase. And yeah, not expecting him to do what he did, but yeah, he was great. He got us onto the Grand Circuit, and probably taught you how to train and how to manage him, how to travel with him. And yeah, he was a great.
He was a quirky horse. Like when he hit the front several times and got beat, you must have just been like, when's this going to end? But he came to it a couple of times.
Yeah, he was very frustrated. He had a lot of ability. I don't know how much money he won, but he should have won $3 million. He was so frustrated. He used to hit the front and pull up, and you couldn't hit him. You hit him, he'd stop worse. So you had to time your run. Couldn't get to the front too soon, and he's a tricky horse to drive. So, but yeah, he should have won the Hunter Cup the night Davey drove him. He just bolted clear to home. He was going to win by 6 lengths, and got to the field and pulled up.
Jenny, horses like Lyell Creek take a moment, Happy Asset, having them on the Grand Circuit around the turn of the century, around 2000, that was an amazing time for both boys, and Anthony really stood up in those big races, didn't he?
He did. He travelled the world with Lyell Creek. He won races in Denmark and Norway, and when they went to the Elite in Sweden, it was just like it was huge. And then we went to America with him. He took Lyell Creek to America, and I won all that money, and their life was, they took a punt, and they weren't scared they didn't die wondering. So, they've got the most out of trotting. They've really had a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, and met some fantastic people.
The two trotters that will always stand out in your career, and the Dominion's been your race. I think you won it 9 times. But between them, at that period of your driving career, the late 90s, early 2000s, Lyell Creek and Take a Moment, a dream horse, either of them, for anybody to drive in their career, let alone at the same time.
Yeah, well, that's right. Lyell Creek come along out of the blue, really, and won everything. Won my first in the Dominion, and took me around the world. So yeah, those horses. Yeah, I just wish they were a bit further apart in their careers, because they come, one on top of the other, and it sort of nearly got too easy there for a bit. I think we won the Dominion 6 years in a row, and they were that good that you just expected them to win every time they lined up. So, while we appreciated them at the time and loved every moment of it, you think back now and think, what wonderful horses.
Now, Lyell Creek was purchased by the flamboyant character that Graham Bruton is. Watched him race at Nelson or something, rang up and said, you need to buy this horse. The rest is simply a fairy tale for sure, but he was a big part of it, wasn't he? The character that he was befitted the performances that Lyell Creek really was able to deliver.
Yeah, well, you could do a whole program on Broody, and it'd be great. But no, Broody was great. I remember that day. You know, I didn't know Broody very well at the time, and the story was that Nigel McGrath had driven him at the trials and said to Jimmy Cole, who's a mate, that he'd win at Nelson, and so Jimmy was a mate of Broody, so he tipped him to Broody, and Broody backed him and watched him, and he won. And when I got back in the drivers' room when I had a spell in between races, there was a message on my phone from Broody, and I didn't really know him that well at the time. And he said, would you go and see if that horse was for sale? He said, I like the way it went. And so I went and seen the Smith boys, and they said, oh yeah, we'd probably sell it, you know, put a price on him. So I rang Broody back and told him the price, and I said, I think he's too dear.
Yep.
And it wasn't very much, but
yep.
So Broody, I think he got home that night and rang them himself and did the deal, and he rang me the next day and he said, I've bought that horse, and he said, I want you to keep driving it, and he said, so I'll give it to Tim to train. So that's how we got it.
And is he the greatest horse you've ever driven?
Yeah, yeah, without doubt. You know, I think he's the greatest horse we've ever seen trotting-wise in New Zealand. You know, people over here sort of compare Mary's Idol with him, but yeah, like before he went away, he was just so dominant. He would just win every race he was in, and so yeah, you know, they're once-in-a-lifetime horses.
Lyell Creek hit the lead in this raid. He's a metre in front of Africa. Sundon's Way and Buster Hanover, but it's Lyell Creek in front. He's got the Inter one. Lyell Creek, the champion of trotting in the Inter Dominion, wins at 5 metres.
He was unbeatable. He basically wasn't he? Yeah.
Well, Broody used to plan the parties for the race, and you can't do that with too many racehorses.
He's down the outside with a big finish, and Castleton's Mission coming from the back. Lyell, Castleton's Mission trying to bob him. Put the circle around Lyell. He's certainly a wonderful trotter. He's Hercules. He's won it well again. His third.
Wasn't a lot of money, not considering that he won $3 million and took you and Tim everywhere.
Yeah, he was, you know, a horse of a lifetime. You know, I know it's a cliche, but he was. He won everything before he left. You know, multiple times. You know, took us around the world, the Elite Lop, and he raced in 7 different countries. Biggest race. So you know, that's a hell of an effort, and biggest trotting race. So yeah, and as I said, I took him to America for a while, and then we left him there, and he was very successful there. So then come back and won the 3 biggest trots again when he got home.
In behind the Medu's Invasion, Lyell Creek has got them shot to pieces. The Pacific Seat and Core Rowe Cup is all over. He takes the peep over the shoulder, and the champ Lyell Creek by 8 lengths. Second at the line is going to be young Pointer Sophocles as third. What a win.
I remember the delight that you showed when he won the Rowe Cup. Everyone had sort of written him off, and me included, felt that maybe it was just a bridge too far, but he just showed us what Lyell Creek was about.
Yeah, he wasn't as good then. He'd had a hard, you know, 2 or 3 years of hard racing in America, and he had bled up there, and Tim, you know, we had to really manage him, you know. Tim did a great job managing him. We had to sort of space his races and just peak him for a big race here and there, and yeah, he got back to that Rowe Cup, and I think that was his first win back. He'd had a few starts and got beaten, but yeah, just blew them away.
Take a moment, a different type of horse, but equally an outstanding performer and at such an early stage. Conversely, you paid a lot more money for him.
Yeah, the same story, or not same story, but I remember Tim telling me he's looking at this horse to buy and the price, and I said, oh, you're mad, you know. Yeah. But then, you know, we talked about it, and we knew Lyell was going to go overseas that year, and you know, there's probably going to be a hole at the top end of the trotting ranks, and so yeah, it looked really good for, you know, Paul Corcoran, and so yeah, Tim paid the big money and syndicated him, makes some really good owners, great owners, and
long time owners at times as well.
Yeah, and we had a lot of fun with those guys, but he probably got lost in the shadow of Lyell a little bit, you know. But and he's, you know, he won 3 Dominions, 2 Inter Dominions and a Rowe Cup, you know, and he one stage he won 18 in a row, all at the top level. This was after he'd already
phenomenal run.
Yeah, so he was a great horse in his own right.
Set for the Trotters Grand Final for 2001 racing. Last sunset, came away galloping for a few strides. He's not going to find the lead as easily as we thought. Bold DJ stepped off the mark first from East Norlad Albafoyle. There goes Queen's Rhapsody galloping, being passed by Leicester Scott, Jerrawara and Cool Fortune.
His win at the Brisbane Inter Dominion at such an early stage, and he was still developing, you know, like when you brought him over here, I don't even think you guys had the expectation that he'd win it, but it would probably make him as a racehorse. Well, it made him all right.
Yeah, he got a bit lucky. I think a couple might have galloped that night, but he was better after that. But yeah, he was good enough to win and got round to the front at a good time. And I think of a couple of the favourites sort of probably didn't go quite as good as they should have. So, but yeah, as you said, if win the Inter-Dominion final at your 14 star, it's a great effort.
It's Take a Moment in front. Mountain Gold is striving with every muscle, but Take a Moment, he's too good. He's the Trotter's champion. Take a Moment, Big Mountain Gold, third Special Force flying home.
And of course, the most famous photo probably of his career with Michael House saluting on Castleton's mission, and yeah, he was brave on that occasion as well. And I think he drew poorly, didn't he? Draw the inside back row
inside
or something?
The second row,
yeah.
And I had to, so got back and
he had to be good, didn't he?
Had to be good, and I ended up getting pushed wide sort of at the end of the back. I was tracking them up 3 wide, not bad, and then got pushed out at the end of the back, so sort of 4 and 5 wide around the bend, and yeah, put in a good effort, and yeah, Mickey Mouse come late, and it was funny, when you drive, you don't really know who's won, and I remember pulling up, I said, well, everyone else in the world will know who's won this race except you and me, Mickey, because,
Yep.
you know, when you drive, you don't know for sure, so, but yeah, I have him on, you know, I got Moon Rock here from Mickey, and I said, I've never seen someone so excited to run second.
And here's Take a Moment, and down the outside, Castleton's mission. Take a Moment, Castleton's mission. Take a Moment, take a bow. Take a Moment. He's won his second Trotter's final. Castleton's mission's only a head away.
The mid-2000s was a real challenging time in your life. We'll get to racetrack performances in a moment, but losing the 2 greatest influences in such a short period of time, in 6 months, losing your dad and then losing your mentor and your boss for so many years and your grandfather in Derek Jones, it possibly shaped the next 10, 15 years, maybe the rest of your life.
Yeah, that was tough times, Greg, but you know, everyone goes through that, you know. Losing Dad was hard because it was sort of unexpected. But we just had to step up and, you know, you just got to get on with life. And then it was a shame to lose Derek so soon after, you know, especially for Mum, you know, and, but yeah, you know, that's life. You know, everyone has tragedies in their life and, you know, we just had to get on with life.
And they taught you so many great life lessons, let alone racing lessons.
Yeah, I love different people. Dad was so quiet and, you know, such a good backbone, you know, he's always there for you. And as Derek was, you know, he was my mentor and, you know, taught you so much about life and how to treat people and he was so much fun, you know, like he used to drive on the drive at home and you'd love seeing his car driving. And I always had a bottle of Black Label Scotch I just used to keep just especially for him and, you know, he loved his whiskey and milk and, but he'd drive in, always a present for the kids, he'd light up your day, yeah.
Whiskey and milk. I reckon he made that drink famous. There wasn't many places that didn't know that was his drop of choice.
Yeah, and he's brought a few good men undone trying to keep up with him, but yeah, it was part of him. I remember when I was a kid working for him, you know, we'd always, big morning teas were big at Derek's place and the visitors would arrive and, you know, the work was sort of finished, so they'd get the whiskey and milk out and there'd be Jack Litton, Jack Hughes, legends of the sport, you know, and they'd sit in the lounge and have a drink and talk about the old days and, you know, I was a young kid, would be there, listen to them and, yeah, it was just great life experiences and, but as you said, Derek, he was so social and everywhere he went, he was welcome and people loved coming to his place and, yeah, it was a lot of fun. Important
time, off the track, on the track, along came a horse called Flashing Red. Tell me about how that unfolded.
Yeah, it was good story. We're actually at the Inter-Dominions in Hobart with Pharrell and a couple of American horses, and we'd known Stewie Hunter, you know, as you do, you meet them on the carnivals and on the trips, and we're at a social function at the casino one night, just having a drink, and he said, I might send this horse over to you. I think the New Zealand Cup will suit him, you know, and he'd been around on the Grand Circuit for a couple of years, and so we said, yeah, you know, it'd be good. So I kept in touch with Stewie over the winter, and he sent him over to us, I think early in the spring, and he arrived, and as I said, well, I think we had a couple other cup horses at the time, and And yeah, he arrived. I drove him first up. He didn't overly impress me, sort of didn't have much speed. I said to Tim, this horse is not going to have enough speed for New Zealand, you know, the open class racing. And then I had my own horse, the Flying Doctor, racing at the same time, and he was going good.
Owned by Karen, by the way. Yeah, I remember this situation.
I've got a story here.
Yeah.
And so I drove Flying Doctor in the Hannah Memorial, and he won. And we got John Hay to drive Flash and Red because we thought he'd suit him. And then come to the Ashburton Flying Stakes, and John drove Flash and Red again, and he was too good for Mainland Banner. And Flying Doctor I was just having problems with him. He was sore, and he just come to the end of it. So it's a funny story. Tim said to me, yeah, this was a couple of weeks before the Cup, he said, oh, you got to make up your mind who you're going to drive, you know, Flying Doctor or Flash and Red. And he said, I think you should drive Flash and Red. And I said, yeah, you know, I probably should. You know, he's going to be the best drive. So, unbeknown to me, Tim got put in the paper that I was driving Flash and Red. But in the meantime, I hadn't told Karen that it wasn't on the horse. So that was
How did that go?
No, it was a little bit tricky, and I think you might have did the interview at the Cup dinner when Flash and Red's groom came over, Nikki Johnson, and
Yep.
Nikki was quite a good-looking blonde girl. And Karen got asked, did you put Anthony in the spare room since he's got off your horse from the Cup? And Karen said, well, Nikki's in the spare room. I don't think it'll be that much of a hardship.
Yeah. I remember that quite well. Yeah, I do. But gee, he was a great star, this horse.
Yeah, he's an amazing horse. He, when you drove him, there wasn't a lot to like about him. He was a great pacer, beautiful pacer, but he had no speed. And it used to take him 100, 200 metres to get to top speed. He's like a freight train. I used to like him to a freight train. It took him ages to get to top speed, but once you got there, you couldn't stop him. And just at the heart of a lion. Like, he had a big, long career before we got him. And he'd started racing in Tasmania as a 2-year-old. And
High echelon, wasn't he? Yeah.
Didn't have a lot of breeding, and he's a funny horse. Like, for a great horse, he didn't give you a great feel, but he'd just stay. And once you got him to top speed, he would just run those 28 quarters all day. But you could never get a 26 or a 27 out of him. But I remember that first New Zealand Cup. You know, I was just so confident. I don't get confident in big races because you know what can go wrong, but I thought, there's no, this was...
There was another Aussie in it, wasn't it? That
Comedy Classic.
Comedy Classic, yeah, that's right.
And Comedy Classic, so I was doing the form, and I thought, all the Kiwis are going to let me go because they'll all want to trail me, you know. Yeah. The only fly in the ointment would be the Aussie because, you know, the Aussies, how they drive, they're pretty confident, and so my worst nightmare was that Comedy Classic ended up in front.
The Christchurch Casino New Zealand Cup, 3,200 metres up to the barrier. They're off and racing, and one of the smartest out in the centre of the field is going to be the favourite. Flashing Red's made a great beginning. Comedy Classics going quickly, and out with those is Tributers, followed through by Atella. Easing back behind them is Mighty Cullen, Sly Flying wider, and then the Flying Doctor, Roman Gladiator getting through on the inside of Tribute.
So lo and behold, Flash begins really good, and bloody Comedy Classics in front. But we got round the first bend, and Andrew McCarthy drove him, and he said, I'm starting in front. And I said, don't be silly, Andrew. I said, let me go and we'll run first and second. And so he did. He was a good driver, Andrew, you know, and he was smart.
And she'd only be about 15 or 20 metres from the leader. The field in the Christchurch Casino stream round the turn into the straight, and Comedy Classic and Flashing Red. The two Aussies, they lead the field. And down past the 2,600, and Anthony Butt takes Flashing Red clear. So it's Flashing Red in front by 2.
You know, we had a little hiccup down the back when For You come and he crossed us, and because I couldn't keep him out. His Flash didn't have the speed, but and he was way too good in the finish.
Into the straight, win For You. Flashing Red's attacking again. Poor Mainland Banner, she's done, she can't do it. Up on the inside, Comedy Classic. Flashing Red and Anthony Butter going for the front. It's Flashing Red. It's an Australian victory. It's an Australian Quinella. Comedy Classic's going to run second. And it's all the honours to Aussie. They've won it. And a good win for Flashing Red from Comedy Classic. It's Ella.
Anthony, your second winning drive in the race. How good is that?
Yeah, never gets always good, Greg. Yeah, so it's a great thrill.
Tell us about the run you got, because you've handed up down the back in a New Zealand Cup.
Well, it wasn't by choice. You know, we were going a bit down the back, and Win For You just had too much speed for me, so it wasn't ideal.
What about the training preparation by your brother Tim, and of course Phil Anderson, who's teamed up with Tim this year? They've done a magic job.
Yeah, you know, they're great trainers, and makes my job easy. You know, they present the horses in beautiful condition, and you know, it's always great when you go out a lot of confidence.
Stewie Hunter's done a fantastic job as well leading into this.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, he has. The horse came over in great order, and he, gave us lots of tips how to train him, and we're very thankful to Stewie for giving us a horse to train. So, it's a big effort, big team effort.
It's been an emotional time for your family in the last 12 months. I know where your thoughts will be.
Thanks, Scoop.
Jenny, he's always had an emotional side, Anthony, and this was never more evident than when he won his cup. The cup for Tim with Flashing Red, the first one. It wasn't long after Murray had passed and Derek, and when I put it to him that they'd be looking down, you knew how much it meant to him.
Yes, it did mean. It meant a lot to all of us, really. It was only 6 months between the two of them.
Yeah. But Anthony being able to still perform at that highest level in what must have been a heck of a challenging time for the entire family, that was a great credit to both boys, wasn't it?
It was, because he definitely did step up, didn't he? He was feeling terribly emotional that day, and he stepped up. Yeah.
Well, you
they
couldn't
would
have
have
done
been
it.
proud of him. They would
Yeah.
have been so proud of him.
You couldn't have done it in a better way in the greatest race of all.
That's right. And as I say, Murray and Dad would have been so terribly proud of him.